Widow's offering, is Jesus condemning me? Mark, the gospel writer, portrays Jesus' saying in a fascinating way. Pride and greed of the scribes are contrasted with the humility and the generosity of a widow. What are the stories in the Bible we are talking about? We are talking about two stories. In Mark chapter 12, verses 38 to 44, Jesus cautions us to beware of scribes' expression of piety and unjust actions. He condemns the scribes for their religious dress code, public etiquette, and claiming a false sense of superiority because of the privilege to serve God. The scribes neglected the duty to be of service to the poor and the vulnerable. On the other hand, Jesus appreciates the widow's offering. The widow offers a few pennies as compared to the rich. But Jesus said the rich gave God out of the abundance, and the widow gave all she had to live on. Now, Jesus exposes corruption among religious leaders. Jesus offers the crowd in the temple shocking information about temple leadership. Jesus is telling the truth about the teachers of the law to the people. The religious leaders have turned their positions to serve themselves, a job that requires little work but pays well. The temple leadership focused on what they could get rather than what they can give. This is a temptation for leadership even today. These behaviors contrast to what Jesus was teaching. If you want to be great, you must be a servant of all. So Jesus is warning the crowds not to follow such selfish leadership. What Jesus prophesied about selfish religious leadership? Now, Jesus prophesies that the religious leaders with selfish and self-serving behavior would receive greater condemnation because they have used the position of trust to loot the most vulnerable in the society. Since early church, leadership has issues about being concerned with personal privilege rather than with faithful service. Now, God, who knows our heart, will judge us accordingly. What is the scene in the story? Jesus was sitting opposite the treasury and saw the crowds casting money into the treasury. The rich and the poor did it. Jesus notices a widow putting in 2 pennies, and Jesus told his disciples that the poor widow put in more than the rich. What made Jesus say it? The rich and the others came to donate and get noticed by other people. The more coins you drop, the more noise it makes. And Jesus says even such donors will receive their rewards. He doesn't condemn them. What made the widow special? The widow's offering was special because the widow put in the treasury 1/10 of an hourly wage, which is a fraction of $1. It's nothing. It is not enough to sustain the widow even for a few hours. A widow might buy a modest meal with the amount of money she gave to the temple treasury. That is that small, that negligible amount. Now, Jesus does not condemn the enormous gifts of the rich, but points out that the woman's offering is larger in spiritual value before the eyes of God. How is the widow's approach different? The rich donate based on a percentage of their income. They weigh what they will give. They weigh what they give with what they get. It is like return on investment. But the widow does not calculate. There is nothing to calculate. It is just 2 little coins. There is no moment of indecision. She did not check her budget, never asked what she would get in return. She had 2 coins and she cast those 2 coins into the treasury, probably feeling bad that she could not give more. So Jesus is dismayed at the religious leadership for misusing the offering of the widow. Jesus admires her faith in God and the sacrificial gift. She gave all she had. And it reminds me of another widow who gave food to Prophet Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 17 verses 8 to 16. Now, Jesus measured the widow's offering not on the amount she gave, but on what she kept for herself to use. Nothing. Jesus is telling the disciples to be like the widow and not like James and John seeking a special position in the kingdom. Jesus tells the disciples to go and do like the widow while the disciples aspire to be like the scribes. When you serve, do it without fanfare, do it silently, do it wholeheartedly. Later in the story of Jesus, Mark will talk about a woman who anoints Jesus' head with precious oil. Mark chapter 14, verses 3 to 9. That's another example of wholehearted giving, like the widow. Jesus later links his self-giving to such selfless actions towards others in the scripture. You can offer gifts to God. We are judged not by the size of the gift, but the intention of the heart, a wholehearted generosity. You may be blessed to do it. Thank you for staying with me and watching this entire video. I appreciate you hitting the like button for this video. Promote this ministry with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Let's meet in the next video.